What is up, you guys? Welcome back to Dad's Podcast Project. My name is Ramon, and today I wanted to talk about letting your kids win at games. And do you let your kids win? What's your approach? I'm going to talk about three approaches today, one of which is letting your children win a majority of the time. The other is the 50-50 approach. And then there's the last, which is not letting them win or hardly ever letting them win. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So letting your kids win at games, and what is the approach that you guys take? Now, I wanted to get a couple other parents to chime in on this topic, so I reached out to a couple of fellow dads out there. And I got two others that sort of hit the nail on the head with those first two perspectives: letting your kids win majority of the time, if not all the time, and the 50-50 approach. Now, when we're talking about the last one, which is hardly letting them win, I'm the one that takes that approach, and I'll explain or clarify a little bit more near the end of the episode as to why I take that approach and why that approach might not be for everybody. So to take the first one, this father, he wanted to remain anonymous, but I reached out to him and he sort of filled me in on the way that he's been raising his son to play games. And when his son was around my son's age and they started really getting into gaming, board games and things like that, he found that his son was not very receptive to losing, that he just shut down. He didn't want anything to do with the game, and it wasn't very beneficial to try to play games with him. So he decided to let his son start to win more and more, and really found that that was what was keeping him interested and keeping him involved in wanting to play these games. However, years later now, his son is a little bit older, and he's now playing peer sports where he's now playing against children his own age, and gone are those those variables of control are now gone, because you're playing against other kids who want to win. You're playing against other kids who don't want to just allow you to win because it makes you feel good. So he's having a really hard time coping with loss and losing. And it's not that that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just that he now has to cross that bridge on teaching his son about coping with losing later on. He has to deal with it now rather than years earlier when his son was younger, or my son's age. And it's something that is the same with all three sort of approaches. Even the 50-50 approach, you still have to teach your children about how to cope with losing, about how to be a good sport, and just understanding that even if you try really, really hard, you may not win. And that's just a part of life. That's a part of playing the games to begin with. So that was his approach, and I respect it. I think that that's totally fine for any other parents out there who want to take that approach, because again, it has to fit your child's needs, and they may be too young in order to receive that message on dealing with losing. They might not understand it. And now that his son's a little bit older, they can converse with one another. They can sit down. Let me take you for ice cream. Let's go grab a burger and let's talk about this loss, or let's sit down and you tell me how you feel. That's something that's a conversation that's very difficult to have when your kids are sitting around 3 to 4 years old. So now that his son's older, he can have that conversation with him. He can sit down and do those things. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the approach he took was wrong. It just means that no matter what the approach you take, you're still going to have these conversations. It just depends on you as a parent to decide what's best for them. And is it better to have these conversations later with them in life or in their life? Or is it better to just try to get these conversations and these lessons banged out when they're young? Moving on to the 50-50 approach, I actually had a conversation with a buddy named PJ805. That's his handle on Instagram. I don't know if he wants his real name out there, but he is a veteran, a Marine Corps veteran, and he's currently serving in the Navy. So he's a military dad, and I really liked his approach. And we conversed via DM, and he told me that I can use what it is that he was saying. So I'll go ahead and read to you some of the messages that he had sent. He said that he tries to give his son a 50-50, depending on the game, so that he can stay excited about the game and still learn how to lose and learn from his mistakes. And again, you have to learn how to lose. You got to learn from your mistakes. Either you do it now, or you do it later. You're still going to have to do it as a parent. So I really like the fact that 50-50 approach seems to allow for that to kind of happen, kind of coincide with entertaining them and keeping their interest, as well as providing these opportunities to teach them about losing. He said that it's really a game for him on keeping his attention and determination on improvement. And there again, where the first dad found that he was losing that attention was when his son was losing. His son was no longer showing as much interest in playing the game, so he just wanted to stop. So this 50-50 approach, it's a balance, keeping that attention span with our kids. And it is a battle because we're competing with iPads now. We're competing with, HD TV. There's a lot of things out there that are a lot more entertaining for kids than a board game. So we really have to upsell it as parents. When I was my son's age, I didn't have an iPad. I didn't have a lot of this technology. Of course, we had television, but our parents were in control of it, and it wasn't really TV on demand. There was one or two channels that had cartoons. Now with things like Google and Apple TV, you have access to Netflix. You have access to all of these things that just they buy our children's attention. And board games have become more and more, in my perspective, kind of pushed back onto the back burner. So really just keeping them motivated and keeping them wanting to play is definitely very important. He said that if he lets him win all of the time, he gains almost nothing and starts to build bad habits for the game that can really reflect in life. And I can totally agree with that you develop these habits in strategy and how to play by winning all the time. You don't really learn what it is you did wrong or what move your opponent may have capitalized on, because that your opponent is allowing you to win. You can't self-reflect. You can't model your next game off of your past losses. And these last two things, that was one of the things. And the last thing he said really hit on a high note. I felt that this was really good. Is that if he doesn't let him win, he gets really discouraged and loses the want to try new things. And that is another thing, keeping them engaged, keeping them encouraged, that when you just totally dominate and you're using your skill with all of your years of experience to your advantage, it could be discouraging for a young person, for your child to want to go up against that. They don't have the years of experience. They don't have the years of wins and losses to sort of shape and mold the way that they play. So it's almost going up against a losing scenario. Now, I use chess as an example because that is a game that requires a lot of skill. It's not necessarily luck that's involved when playing a game like chess. And keeping them engaged and learning from these sort of lessons on their minimal skill set versus you as the parent with a higher level of skill. Again, it's an uphill battle for them. So keeping them motivated and keeping them wanting to continue to try and to pursue the task of overcoming difficulties, it can be challenging. Because even then, a lot of these games, I bring up tablets and I bring up, these iPads and whatnot. These kids are playing their games on. A lot of them are primarily just reward systems. There's not really much loss. There's not really ways to lose in these games. You just keep going and going and going, and you're receiving reward after reward after reward. And so it isn't necessarily like a game like chess. It's not like checkers or any of these other games. So transitioning into my method or the approach that I take with my son is I play the game at the skill set that I have. So to be honest with you, he doesn't really win. Unless it's a game of luck, he's not winning. And it's not out of spite or anything like that. It's not that I'm just trying to be this hard individual that, well, you know nothing and I know everything, so I'm winning all the time until you get good enough to win. The approach that I take, I have to really focus hard on being a good sport when I do win and teaching him about good sportsmanship, because I am winning all of the time. So if I were winning and I were showboating or telling him, oh, you lost, and trying to get under his skin and make him feel bad, that does nothing for him. It does nothing for me either. So it's important that I focus on teaching him what it is to be a good sport, what it is to be a good winner, as well as reflecting on the loss. Well, here's the move you made that I was able to then capitalize on that. Here's what you did, and this is what I did. And getting him to see that his moves need to be a little bit more thought out. Now, we're not playing chess yet. So these heavy conversations are few and far in between, because right now for the two of us, it's Connect 4, Jenga, really, really basic games. But the lesson I'm trying to teach him is look at the bigger picture. Don't look at just putting the piece in the slot and hearing that clang of that piece of plastic when it hits the bottom. Don't look at this entire tower and think to yourself just the one piece you're trying to take, but really step back and look at the entire thing, and trying to keep his attention all in the same token. But I take this approach because it was the approach that was taken with my brother and I from our dad. He played for keeps. And when we played chess, I never won, ever. Not until I was in middle school. When I was in middle school, I just remember this long game we played, and it was like the house was getting hot because we were just playing for such a long time. And I finally beat him. I was trying my very best after years and years of just losing at this game. And I finally won. And the overwhelming feeling of victory is something that I can't even really express. It's something that I can't even really explain. But I finally did it. Now, we played other games where we would win. My brother and I, we would win these games because there was a lot of luck involved. If we were playing games like cards, or we were playing, games like Monopoly, or any of these other games where it's really just based chance and luck have an influence on the outcome. But when it came to chess, that was a very, very skilled game. And I learned a lot in all of those years of losing on how to play. And my brother and I, we would play with each other. So, there was wins and losses that were going back and forth between the two of us. So we were continuing to practice. And then we would then challenge our father when we felt, okay, we're getting a little bit better here. Let's go ahead and try again. And it was the approach that had worked for me. I'm not exactly sure if it's the approach that worked for my brother, because he and I would primarily play a lot of games together. And then when we played games with my dad, I don't think it was really like a one-on-one thing. We would all play like group games together. But having that lesson on good sportsmanship really taught me when I won how to not gloat. I mean, I'm talking like years of losses here. I could have very well just jumped on the couch and been like, "Ooh, in your face, all this, that, and the other." But I learned through his victories that that's not what we do. That's not what our family does. And that's not what I was raised to be like. So when I won, when I finally beat my dad, I was so overwhelmed with just the victory in itself. And I was like, that's a really good game. You know, it took such a long time and he congratulated me and it just felt really good. And I think that though it was the approach taken with me, I also have to respect the fact that my son is not me. He's a little bit me. He's a little bit his mother, but he's a whole lot of himself. And by saying that, it's understanding as a parent that what worked for me may not necessarily work for him. It's the approach that I've started to take with him, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the approach that I will take with him. That maybe a 50-50 approach would be best. And it's something that if any parent out there were trying to think of, well, how do I approach playing games with my kids or whatever, if they have no idea what to do, I would say take a 50-50 approach because it's kind of the best of both worlds. You're letting them win, you're letting them lose, and you're teaching them all in the same from those wins and those losses. And it might very well be a little bit more fun for them. In a game of skill, my son doesn't win. In a game of chance, he very well may win. Maybe not 50-50, maybe 50-50. So, but again, it does have to be tailored to him. And if I self-reflect and I look back at the game in itself, and if he's taking interest in it or if he's starting to lose interest in it, I have to then modify my course of action and really sort of be okay with the fact that the course that I may be on right now might not be the right one. And I have to be okay with that as well as a parent. I can't force feed. This is the way I grew up. This is the way you're growing up. That's not what I'm really learning when I get out there and I talk to a lot of other parents. I'm learning that the way that they grew up doesn't necessarily work for the way that their kids are growing up. Because their kids are not them. And that's all the reason why being fluid with your parenting, being able to sort of try this and it's not working and try that, this is working, and tailor your parenting to what they're more receptive to. Now, this is all different from conversations on things like discipline and whatnot, but with regards to keeping them engaged and teaching them lessons about how to be a good winner, how to be a good loser. Maybe that didn't sound too right, but how to cope with losing and understanding that it doesn't necessarily have to be just because of you. It may be the luck of the draw. It may be the fact that you're playing someone who has more experience or, whatever their case may be, that all of these things sort of coincide with one another in order to allow them to learn and to grow. And hopefully these things transition into life, because life can also be filled with some of these wins and some of these losses. We're not always going to get the job that we want. We may not always, just win at maybe adult league hockey or basketball. I'm sort of just going off on a tangent right there, but that's kind of what I wanted to share today with you guys. And again, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to listen to these podcasts. And I want to continue the conversation with you guys and ask what your experience has been in letting your children or teaching your children about playing games, about wins and losses. Do you let them win all the time? What has been your approach? Has it been letting them win a majority of the time, if not all the time? Has it been a 50-50 approach? Or has it been on the other spectrum where you win all the time and you don't let them win until they have the skill set to beat you? all of these methods are good, in my opinion. None of these methods are for everybody. The best method is the method that you as the parent decide is the best for them. As long as you're paying attention to them and what is working for them, that's what's best. So again, what has been your guys' experience? And thank you for taking the time to listen to these podcasts. If you're catching me on iTunes, feel free to leave me a rating, a 5-star, even a 4-star. Any of these things would be great. If you guys are catching this on YouTube, feel free to leave me a thumbs up. That's always very helpful. Subscribe if you like the content. We have new episodes, I have new episodes coming out every Monday. And as always, till next time, you guys, see ya.